using someone's pencil or something, I shouldn't have been doing something.
They're saying before you get in here, I mean, the flu that's going around right now is awful.
It's what?
Whatever flu is going around right now is really, really awful.
It just started in my throat Sunday, and then it's just been like this, it was like a sinus headache, and a little bit of a cough, but it's not as bad when I had COVID a year and a half ago, so thank God for that. But all right, I'm trying to find. And while I'm opening this, I realized the project 416, 418 West Main may have been consent agenda. I just at that point kind of said it shouldn't take long.
That's right.
So, and then I'm sorry, I haven't had the ability to do anything to prepare for the design guideline discussion, so I'm just going to scratch that, and I think if you all had any questions for me at the end of the meeting, maybe tackle some of those, but I'm just going to wrap up and go back home.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, it's 5:30. Shall we get started? All righty. Welcome to this regular monthly meeting of the Charlottesville Board of Architectural Review. Staff will introduce each item, followed by the applicant's presentation, which should not exceed 10 minutes. The chair will then ask for questions from the public, followed by questions from the BAR. After questions are closed, the chair will ask for comments from the public. For each application, members of the public are each allowed 3 minutes to ask questions and 3 minutes to offer comments. Speakers shall identify themselves and provide their address. Comments should be limited to the BAR's purview, that is, regarding only the exterior aspects of a project. Following the BAR's discussion and prior to taking action, the applicant will have up to 3 minutes to respond. Alrighty. Before we go to the consent agenda, we open the meeting for matters from the public not on the agenda, or if anyone in the public would like to speak to anything on the consent agenda. Currently, the only item on the consent agenda are the meeting minutes from November 2023. We don't have anyone from the public in the room. Remy, anyone online?
No hands raised at this time. If you'd like to
Alan
speak.
and Greg will be participants in the first item, so we can elevate them as well.
Do I hear a motion to pass the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't here.
Very good, thank you, Carl. No deferred items this evening. And our first new item, we had a preliminary discussion about it a month or two ago. This is 416 and 418 West Main Street. Project is canopies, decks, and patios at north and west facades. Jeff, would you like to introduce it? So we had a preliminary discussion, so save your voice. I know you're feeling poorly.
I'll do
So.
best I can. So this is 416, 418 West Main. I've got an image up here on the screen from Alan, or not, Greg was out drone piloting last week, and I added these. There's a couple more, but the A, B, C, D, E in the proposal corresponds with these. I had E up on the side there next to D in the staff report. It's a deck that'll be constructed on the back part, but so I have, if you want, said these images, they're helpful in any way. I can go to them, and if necessary, and I know Greg and Alan are on, if they want to use them, they can. So there's, this is, it's a structure, actually several structures, date to the 1940s in the downtown ADC district. And just to point out, I know they are on West Main, but the downtown ADC district continues another block and then becomes West Main. So maybe, again, something we'll probably address with the guidelines. But obviously, these were automobile-oriented buildings on West Main, and they are contributing to the district. The request that they're making is across the front, which would be the south facade of the building along West Main, and then on the west side, constructing some canopies across the front, and on the side, elevated deck with some canopies above. You all reviewed this, well, not reviewed, but discussed it, I think, back in September, generally supportive of it. So now it's coming back as a formal request. There's some details associated with the design, the railing, the canopy. Those reflect designs of other things already done on West Main. For example, I know the name of the restaurant has changed, but the gas station that has the canopy.
Black Cow.
Yeah, and it identical design to that, and so I realize there aren't detailed drawings of some of those things, but there are references to where they've been employed on other sites. So hopefully that will suffice. But I think Greg can address any questions you have about that. With staff, no issues with that. I guess I should say I as staff now. And if you have any questions for me, I'll excuse me, hand it off to Greg and Alan Kajin. You guys there?
Yes, hello, this is Greg. Hey, everybody, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, thanks.
Alan, you on?
I am here.
Okay, I
you hear me?
can, go ahead. I can do an initial introduction, if you like. Try to pick up where we left off. We had come with it's interesting, that photo, before you move on, the scaffolding we have up there for construction of the upper addition, has sort of a mock-up character to it, at least for the central canopy we're talking about across the sidewalk. But we came with a canopy over orzo, there you go, and with similar material as you mentioned, 420 West Main, Little Star, now Black Cow, and a little bit of a canopy over Albemarle Baking Company, and a side deck and canopy. And some of the comments were go to steel. We have wood for orzo. There was a feeling that the lighter weight of steel added to the success of 420, and also the character of the buildings in that area. And then there was a suggestion also to just explore continuing the canopy across the building facade, and even maybe widen out at Albemarle Baking Company to balance out with the orzo. So we explored that and did it, have some to see, to look at. And the side deck, for those who saw it, had a partial deck and then a canopy over the back part of the deck, and it was raised and had steps. We leveled that out as suggested, and brought the canopy down to align with the lower part of the clear story that's going around at the upper addition. Before we had stepped it up so the canopy over that deck would align with the roof line of the new addition, and now we have it with leveling out the deck. We have it all, you'll probably see it from the photos better. We have it aligned to make it work with a flat deck all the way across. And what we've done also with that deck is add more of an opaque type of railing for the back side of it and open towards the front. And then to carry that sentiment of maybe doing more than what we presented at the last meeting, we went ahead and did what we have been wanting, the client has been wanting to do, is add a do something where the old fish market area is back there. There's a cooler occupying that space, and there's a desire to, and all of this to improve the exterior space, to put a patio and then an upper deck that would serve the upper floor of that little area, that domed space there. So those are all the different components, decks and component patio and canopies that we're looking at and presenting. So I don't know if you want to get through, go through some of the images. Jeff or Alan, you want to add anything?
No, I'm okay.
So, as described, I've tried to keep it brief. We're using the same type of language of the metal, the tube. We're going to go for darker. We're proposing a darker color, not black, but dark gray, probably towards a warmer gray. Just as a nod to a softer color, perhaps. I know Orzo had wanted wood. We do have wood as purlins in this design, so there is a layer of wood in the purlin level that's above the rafters, just below the poly roof, the white poly, that would be there at a regular rhythm of the 3 feet on center. And I don't know if it's just worth getting into and asking questions, but I believe we kind of covered a lot that was suggested, and had sort of a comprehensive layout.
I'll just scroll down to the renderers.
Yeah, I mean, some of the initial images are just context,
I think,
in case you couldn't get out if you had the flu or the snow or something, but. So that's an image. You can see the side deck is flat now with the canopy roof lowered, but it's set back. We didn't want to bring it into the side of the building. And I think there's a desire not to have it fully open, but have some area that's covered for that upper area, so that canopy on the side deck sets back coming from the corner of the existing building. And so there's columns that hold for the front part of the poly roof and metal framing. There's columns, 3 over at Orzo, coming out of the existing planters that are there. The brick planters with the wooden slats of previous BAR, and it's constructed with coming out off of those, and then 2 columns of the Albemarle Baking Company, and then for the stretch between those 2, they're supported by cables or pipes, that is, or I'm trying to think of rods, and that was suggested by the structural engineer, and kind of lends to the character of those type of canopies. And the rear, all the way around to the fish, the old fish market building, those are all enclosed with a cement panel railing, similar to what we've done across the street. I don't think, I just put an image in there, but more than the image boards is pretty far down. But we're looking at using that for that back section, and right there. And if you go up, see the image on the lower left, and if you go back up, whoever's scrolling,
I am. Got it.
you can see that fish market. We're trying to, and right there we have in the back of that upper deck on the side. We also have it all the way around the fish market. Just trying to be, a little bit of enclosure, knowing the parking's there, a lot of activity. So those are the 2 type of railings for those decks. And, we do enclose the patio down below in that back parking area. that illustrates the same construction method throughout these, which are slightly different actually from what we did at 420. But it, and there was also a sort of call for simplicity, and this is kind of simple 101 architecture of post and beam and rafter and purlins for such a roof. And they're tube construction, tube elements, 6x6, 4x10, I think, and 4x6. And the purlins are roughly 2x2.
All right.
That's probably enough of me, for me, and I can answer questions.
Okay. That concludes y'all's presentation. We'll ask for any questions from the public. All right, and questions from the BAR.
The wood purlins, are those intended to be painted?
Probably stained and sealed, so that there's a consistency and a, try to get to a desired sort of medium dark brown.
Similar dark color to the steel below.
Yeah, in tone, but have a little, have some wood feel to it, color to it.
And then one other question, just to confirm that the D deck, the side deck, is intended to rest on the neighboring building?
Yes, so we walked through that with the engineer, and the thought was that that wall, that outer wall, that yellow addition to that building, we can extend up from those blocks and create a resting pad, probably just one layer of blocks running across there to support that, so it'll rest on its neighbor.
Got it, thank you.
I have a few questions. First is, you had a wood decking. What kind of wood is that?
Well, Alan, I don't know if you want to jump in. I think iPay, ePay is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You've had a lot of success with that. You like it. That are an alternative of that, in that light. The suggested framing for that is that we'll have a steel superstructure and then wood framing in there, and then we'll put the decking on top of that.
So when you look up from underneath, you're gonna see steel structure, and then you'll see the wood. It'll be exposed, the wood decking.
Yes.
And then the polycarbonate. You said that's the exact same as what you put in across the way in the adjacent.
Yes.
What is that product? Is that like a cow wall, or I haven't really looked at it too closely.
It's a manufacturer. We started using it on other projects and just keep going. Let me see if I can.
I think it's made in Texas, right?
Yeah, it is. They keep changing their sort of little individual names. They call their company Cover Your Pergola, but there's different types of products within their line.
And I don't know, were you gonna? Well, my last question is about the pull-in that's currently, like, what is it, 3 or 4 parking spaces? Is that going to remain as parking, or it almost looks like in the 3D that the grass? Yeah, was the intent to keep that as parking, or what was that? What is that little courtyard going to be used for now?
Yeah, so I don't know who's scrolling. If they want to go to a page like maybe 12. That's probably just my computer graphics, not, taken to the extreme level of detail.
Yeah,
but-
I think the
yeah.
intent was to keep all the keep the parking.
Okay.
Yeah, the intent is to keep all that functioning as it is, and so the canopies are kind of, extending out to the areas that are pedestrian, so to speak. And the parking and the circular drive are maintained.
Okay. So, yeah, I was looking at page 22 of our 87, that has kind of like the trees in the front. And, I don't know if we can scroll to that.
Page 22, Greg.
It's the one right before this, Jeff,
Okay, let me go back. I'm looking at my PDF.
or maybe not.
Let's see. I just noticed my
There we
page.
go, that one, yeah, so I was just wondering if, like, are all those trees in the same position? I guess currently what you do is you pull in over that section that's white, which is, like, I'm assuming like some kind of a new paver that leads into the Albemarle baking.
Yes, yeah, it's kind of interesting. If you walk out there, there's a lot of different paving surfaces, and there's a lot of, the vehicles drive over several, especially when you go around back, several different surfaces. We're going to clean it up quite a bit, but it's pretty much going to be left. I don't know if there's a photograph. Let me see if there's one. It's,
But you
it's,
would
it's
drive
a-
it over the white area.
Supply.
there's a sidewalk,
There's like a,
material going from the sidewalk of the street, Tower Mall Bacon.
Oh, there you go, yeah.
I don't know if you can find an image.
Thank you. I was just wondering if that parking, or tree scape was changing, but it doesn't look like it, other than the fact that you might put new paving in leading to Albemarle Baking Company.
Mm-hmm, that's about it. I think the trees and the parking remain. That's
Thanks.
it.
Yeah, you can kind of see from that, the image shown, the drone shot, the vehicle kind of just drives over that area.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of paved and, it's a little bit of gray area there, I guess. Almost like as you drive over the sidewalk to get into the space.
So your renderings have two different colors for, I'll call it the driveway to the back parking lot. In some images, it's shown as red, and in other images, it's gray or white with
Yeah.
paving blocks.
Yeah,
What's your intent there?
Alan, we haven't discussed this much. I know there's a lot of construction going on right through there now. If there's an intent, the later images, I can see. I must have changed along the way and then go all the way back and. But there's a red stamped pavement that's further back. I can imagine that just being continued to the street. But
And
Al?
you may have your, I think when you show in front of the bakery, I think that would remain asphalt in the very beginning of it. And because it's not raised up there, you have to drive through there, so. And then, there is some concrete, sidewalk there now.
and I think he's talking about the drive to the rear parking lot.
That's correct.
Right, that would remain, I guess, that's stamped concrete, and that would remain, I think that should be red, so I think Greg's drawing is right on that.
So we would take what is from the building back, if you look at that aerial photo, and bring that to the street.
Yeah, that area got pretty, beat up, because we decided it was the appropriate time to underground the utilities. So we underground the utilities to the extent we could, maybe in anticipation of one day Main Street, West Main undergrounding utilities, and we would have to rip everything up again, you know?
Okay. Carl, you any questions?
I do have a couple questions. Have you thought about lighting at all? It looks like all of the lighting on the building is up above the canopies. And I think you're gonna lose some lighting in the little site walls that are around Orzo's patio. So, yeah, I'm wondering if there gonna be any lighting on this?
Good question. I think there should be, I haven't installed it yet, but I've been buying some, it's a long tube lighting. So think of it as, strip lighting in a long tube. So I think there should be something under the canopy as well as something above the canopy. But I'm not sure I've fully spec'd that out. I do have the stuff that I just bought, but we haven't installed in a project yet. I want to see how it works. But it would be some kind of LED strip lighting, you know, I think underneath the canopy. Or you could put lighting on the building, on the face of the building. Probably the easiest, not as disruptive to the tenants to put it on the top, under the canopy.
There is lighting that is to be installed that is shown in the CAD drawings that was approved with the BAR that kind of came along with the addition. And all those are sort of those goose type of lamps that face down. If you know, see an image that has them, and that's above the canopy, of course, and it would shine, probably illuminate. You know, it still would, you know, shine through the nature of this type of partially translucent. But I agree that probably should be some more specific lighting below. I think the Orzo patio area already has some lighting ingrained into the floor, the concrete, maybe the sidewalls. But I think anytime you put up a canopy, you tend to want to have some lighting with it. You know, you always think of that string lights, but no, we have not actually specifically addressed that.
I apologize. Some of these are just CYA questions, just to make sure. So the way you frame this on the adjacent restaurant, there's a fascia that went around the canopy. It looks like in this case you're going to have the beams and the purlins are just going to kind of end. Is that the intention? And if so, I assume all of those are going to be, if they're hollow tube steel, you're going to have a cap at the end of each of them. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, they're capped. We talked a little bit, you know, last time we came in September. We also brought some thoughts on fenestration for the Mickey Courtyard, and we're talking about that pavilion there across the street, and that has tube construction, and you know, the rafters, a lot of those elements are, you know, capped as well. But you know, in between the two large areas, Orzo, you know, the east and west, Orzo and Albemarle Baking Company, it would be similar to the 420 in that you see a band in that respect along the sidewalk canopy.
Oh, so you would have a
There is
fascia.
a fascia.
Yeah, along that one, you know, in between there.
In the center bay, just in the center bay.
Okay.
The center bit. Okay.
Yeah, the center. Yeah.
Gotcha. Have you thought at all about how does the drainage work for this? I assume the decks, the water drains through, but for the area where you have the polycarbonate, how does that work?
They slope from the building out
Okay.
at about 1%.
Are you just gonna have the water just shoot off the end, or are you gonna have gutter there?
They
Yeah,
have to have a gutter system. I don't know. What do you,
I assume just out on the end. On the 420, we have this system. I don't know if anybody's looked close or if my image shows it, but we have these these little fins, it's called rain handlers,
Mhm.
that diffuse, any kind of thicker amount of water coming off the edge there, rather than a gutter to capture it.
Okay.
Um,
I think I sort of see that. I should have looked closer on the way over. I forgot to look at the Black Cow Chop House to see how you did that.
Yeah, it's hard to see in the image.
Okay.
But where I think it could matter, so to speak, or be more important is that the Albemarle, where there's still pedestrian pathway outside of that edge, whereas all the others, in a sense, the edge, is when you drop a plumb line down, it's at the curb, to the parking area, so the sidewalk is under all the roof everywhere else except from Albemarle. You're walking, perpendicular to that.
So, I apologize. Did you say that you do think you'd have a gutter there, or you think you would just have like a dispersal thing like you have at next door? A diffuser sort of thing? I apologize. I'm not speaking.
No.
tonight.
Yeah, you're asking a question. We haven't. These are good questions.
Okay.
You get into the points that have it. And Alan, I don't know if you don't want to weigh in. I think those rain handlers are an interesting way to do it without the.
I think certainly along the narrow facade, and I think if you're sitting in, for example, in front of Orzo, and you do have rain, they're meant to protect you from rain. I think we have to be prepared to put a small gutter if we need it to protect the people sitting underneath,
Yeah, the Orzo, they all slope away from the building. So the outside edge of Orzo, goes past the sidewalk and drops. And also that's a pretty big overhang from the patio area. The Albemarle Baking Company, I think, is where you have an edge that drops there, but most traffic is coming from the sides. I doubt folks are going to be really walking in off the sidewalk straight into that area for just practical means. They're usually coming in from the back parking lot or the side parking lot, and the sidewalk there are coming across. So I'm not sure. It's it seems like it's a certain condition where it's just enough rain where there's extra rain coming off that edge, and if it's pouring down raining, it's pouring down raining. If it was me personally, I wouldn't put anything there. I think that we've done enough in a sense from nothing. So, but I'm open to everybody else's opinion.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you're the architect, and you're also Mr. Kajin owns the building, so it's however you guys want to handle it. I'm curious what we'll end up seeing is more of my concern.
Yeah. So Alan, it's up to you, but I suggest we just leave it clean and simple like that, and
yeah, I'm in favor of that, unless it creates a problem and I don't think it will for the majority of it, but unless it creates some kind of problem for people sitting there. And I think it's been okay at 420, so I haven't gotten negative feedback that we need more. So maybe the rain handlers will work, and they're certainly kind of a cleaner solution,
And for the other poly canopy on the upper deck, that would slope backwards, back
Okay.
out rather than towards the deck.
One more question. Your precedent image for the fiber cement panels, it shows a reveal system. Is that the intention?
Yeah, Alan, have you, Alan's doing projects all over, like the country, so that's my assumption, that we would still use that same type of reveal. It's actually used over on the wing that extends out on the other side of this whole complex that, contains the backside of the parking lot where the railroad tracks are. You know what I'm talking about? Let me see, what image are we looking at right now? Okay. But is used in another part of the building complex in addition to across the street and other places. So that was my thinking, yes, that little aluminum type of reveal would be used in the,
Yeah, I think, it's certainly the cleanest installation, I think.
as shown in the examples.
And I think the example that Greg gave you was from actually behind the Afghan market, where we did a project with a canopy there, and
Okay.
that's where that picture comes from.
That's my questions.
Ron, Breck, Sherry, questions? All right. We'll ask for any comments from the public.
See any?
All right. Then I'll call for comments from the BAR.
I don't have any concerns. I think, I mean, due to the kind of industrial nature of this building and the industrial nature of the additions going on to it, I think it's okay that it's, a lot of these details will probably be figured out in shop drawings. But I am concerned about lighting. I think we need to have a way to review that, or at least have Jeff be able to review that. And, so I don't know if we can make a motion that then hunts the lighting to Jeff.
I feel
Or
like
do we care
lighting,
enough that
lighting
once-
came up in the review of the earlier project, and as I recall, there was some question about the color of the light, and I'd be comfortable if the lighting matches that was deployed there. I can't remember what it is offhand.
When you say the earlier project, do you mean
The-
next door?
Yes, next door, yeah. But it may not have been installed, I'm not sure.
I'm trying to remember what lighting I've seen out there, because I walk by there at night all the time, and it honestly can't remember what the lights look like. You don't notice it? Well, I think
You
it's
can
getting
see
dark,
the,
if I remember correctly, but it's been winter.
in the sample images, if I'm correct and it hasn't changed, we use the string lights, the classic restaurant. I think those are adjustable, and I have some on my porch that I change depending on the season, the color, and you can even do patterns of blinking type stuff. But I found those fairly successful for situations like that, because they're highly adaptable, and just create a spirit, and pretty effective without big glare points, distributed points of light.
Well,
I think it's down at page 26, or at least in my PDF.
I think that makes sense, and just say that, well, we always put the condition, a maximum of 3,000 Kelvin and dimmable, which allows us to, if something's too bright, we can always reduce it later, or ask the owner to reduce it later. So, I mean, Jeff, are you okay with leaving the lights to administrative approval?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking parking lot lights or, stadium lights, this catenary lights, which I would view an okay, administratively anyway, so,
I mean, I think I would be concerned if wall packs started appearing on the side of the building. Things like that.
right, and I think, what we have right now is what is shown and what's presented, and if suddenly something pops up out there that's not shown, so I don't think it's okay if you all want to address it. Our standard preference that lamping be dimmable, require it be no higher than 3,000 K color temperature, and CRI of 80, preferably 90. Not less than 80, preferably not less than 90. finding most of these catenary lights that are out in the market, they fit. But no, the short answer is I don't have any problem. If you all want to say, show me, share with staff what any lighting, but that no lighting is currently proposed.
Are we okay with the wood? I think at one point, and I don't know if it's actually in our guidelines, but I know Mary Jo used to always talk about stains had to be opaque. And I don't know that I've actually found that in our guidelines somewhere, but it was just the idea that
Isn't that
you don't want the wood to fade into weather over time. But, is that a concern for this?
It's a fairly minor component.
Yeah.
I feel it won't be that visible. I have a functional concern. I think that, that wood in that condition under the translucent panels, might work, but that's not our purview.
I personally am okay with opaque. I actually kind of prefer to get a consistency, and I think it's a stronger finish with the steel. And I'm sure we would share that concern of the wood's quality being able to withstand, the forces, the sun and the heat. And we're going to try to get as strong of a wood as possible. The species. It doesn't have to be wood, actually. It could be, we could switch to a metal. There's a certain ease when you have, wood for applying all that roofing and such. And, perhaps I thought that it would soften it up a little bit. But even if we did metal 2x2s, maybe a thinner walled so it could be screwed into, we could maybe paint that brown as well to have just a little bit of color up there. I'm thinking out loud, Alan, so I'm not sure if you have an opinion.
Well, if I were to go metal, I'd probably want it to be all the same color, I think, all
Yeah,
the same gray.
I think if it's steel, it should match the steel below. All blend in.
That's fine. I'm fine with that. Like I said, the gray that I'm thinking about has sort of a warmness to it as it is. So it has some brown in it, and it's a warm gray.
Yes, does anyone have objections to the wood? Because that's what's submitted in the application.
I'm okay with it. Yeah, I'm not gonna, it won't block me from approving. I mean, I can make a motion if no one else has any other comments.
I have a few other comments. I have a question for the rest of the board. Are there any issues with this building literally touching the adjacent building? That those were two different historic properties, and then I understand from, like, to avoid columns, it's really clean to have it rest on the other building, but could that be an issue down the line if you're trying to, what's original of the one building that this one's literally touching it now?
Don't forget, that's an addition. That little yellow piece was, we had to add that onto the building for bathrooms. So that's actually an addition onto the older building.
I think these buildings are all kind of funky and unique, and it's going to be very obvious that this polycarbonate thing is new. So it doesn't bother me.
I actually think it looks cleaner that way.
I have one comment about, overall, I think the canopy in the front's really nice and clean and thin. I think one of the defining features of the existing building is that brickwork and how it curves up, and it's, I don't know if that accent brick is modeled exactly correct, but if there's any way for the tie rods to be inset from those so they don't sit right in between those two the two curves of the accent break, I think it would help those still read as kind of the defining piece.
Yeah, I agree. And those are sort of just laid out in a rhythm, and they haven't been placed. And I totally agree with that. I think we can make an effort to, because I think that one that's over there actually looks close enough to the edge that it's maybe unnecessary. You know, close enough to the support of the larger structure of the orzo. So I think that's a good point. We'll make sure that's not awkward, which it is. You know, now that I'm looking at it, you pointed it out, I would have at least centered it between those two if I had to have it there. But I think you could probably take it out and, you know, move them over.
Any
and
of the renderings that show the front, like, I'm on page 19 of 87, northeast with proposed is kind of a good view of.
There's, Greg's drawings have page numbers on the bottom right.
7 of 27.
You lost me on where curved.
There's the kind of reddish brick that's the two little stripes of reddish brick. They actually curve at the top as opposed to turning it like a 90-degree angle.
Another page to look at is 14 of 27. I think that talks about what I was talking about. That's close enough to where the less deep canopy between the two larger ones connects to the orzo side, and I think that rod right there wouldn't even be necessary, and then we could adjust the other rods to be balanced out.
This is a minor thing, but just in relation to that, it looks like the signage gets blocked now. You know, most of the shots where it looks like they're taken a little higher than eye level, but that one right there, you know, there's kind of a nice, and I don't know if signage is really in our purview or relevant to our conversation tonight, but there is a nice composition the way that looks right now. You know, the sign with the racing stripes or whatever we're calling that brick accent. So I don't know if you guys have gotten that far to think about that, but it does appear like the signage is getting blocked from view now kind of by the canopy, and it changes the composition a bit too.
Yeah, I was going to comment on that as well, and maybe in a preemptive way, I could imagine that the applicant might want to shift the text to the west, and I think that would be fully in keeping, and the new canopies kind of recenter the building in a different way.
Yeah, maybe it needs to even come up a little bit.
Yeah, we have to paint the building when it's, you know, the work is all done, so I think we can just apply for new signage.
So we're talking about starting the Main Street Market, starting the main on the other side of the vertical racing stripes.
Yep.
Yeah, and then that would,
Yeah, I think so.
that would fit the new canopy area really well, probably. It'd be right in that zone. And bring it up a little higher, 6 inches, 6 to a foot, 6 inches to a foot, or something like that.
You have any other comments from the VAR?
Just focusing on the guidelines, which is our purview. I think it's an appropriate application. The additions of the balconies and decks don't destroy historic elements for the most part on this that characterize the property. And clearly, the new work is going to be differentiated from the old. And I think because of its sort of industrial, car, auto sale background, it's the elements that are being introduced seem compatible with it and complement it, really, so they don't destroy what the building was or whatever's left of it.
Jeff, I'm not sure if you received that email sent today of the survey.
Yeah.
An early survey. I think you mentioned that earlier, maybe, but for 1999, the survey, it showed a canopy across the front of that. There you go.
Were we sent that?
No, I sent it to Jeff today. I apologize.
Okay.
But that speaks to what you just said. I
Cool.
think that there actually were a lot of canopies, along that edge, street edge, especially along that facade.
This is just my curiosity now, but do you know why the building was at an angle?
Huh. Alan?
No. That's the way we bought it, so.
A lot of it had function, the way the parcel line was set,
Yeah.
following that. So,
Yeah.
a lot of the parcels, they're not square, they're not, they're parallelograms in a lot of places, so, probably just following the lot line. And,
Yeah, I agree. Although, as you can see, it jumps over the lot line over there at the right side.
And
So-
I don't have the Sanborn, but I know there was a lot of manufacturing, carriage works here, so there may have been simply walls that they followed, and maybe there wasn't anything on the other side to have any context from. So, you have to remember West Main really didn't have a lot of stuff. So, it wasn't like you would notice your building was at an angle to the neighboring building. There may not have been one there, so.
Maybe when West Main was a smaller road, it maybe was more perpendicular at that point to the lot lines. I don't know. And then when they widened it, they had to lean it or something. Just-
Well, the city and town council records are full of pages of discussions about West Main Street and headaches and problems. So, yeah, something for an energetic researcher to look into someday. I just wanted to add, I think of the house over on Hartman's Mill Road, that's the sort of the accumulation. I think this, as a commercial building, is this the closest we have to that house over there. It's sort of it's a whole lot going on there. To go and tell you what part's what, I'm not sure I could, but it's an interesting building, assemblage of buildings.
All right, well, if there's no other comments, I think, Carl, you were working up a motion.
Yeah, I think I've got what we talked about.
Got some brewing.
Having considered the standards set forth in the city code, including city design guidelines for ADC districts, I vote to find the canopies, decks, and patios of the north and west facades at 416, 418 West Main Street satisfy the BRS criteria and are compatible with this property and other properties in the downtown ADC district. And the VAR approves the application with the following conditions. Any lighting that should be added should be reviewed administratively by staff. It should have a color temperature not to exceed 3,000 Kelvin, be dimmable, and have a color rendering index of a minimum of 80, preferably 90. The tie rods for the canopies should be coordinated to not conflict with the accent brick on the front of the building. Consider adjusting the signage at the front of the building. And that's it.
The stain should be okay.
Yeah, the stain on the wood should be an opaque stain or paint.
Do I hear a second?
A second.
That was a group second.
Yeah.
All right, I'll call the vote. Mr. Schwartz,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. Timmerman,
Aye.
Mr. Whitney,
Aye.
Mr. Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Gastinger,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Tyler, you were talking about where the accent curves, is that, okay,
The renderings don't show it
yeah,
accurately.
my brain's not functioning because sorry.
The photograph does it better justice.
All right,
It's a really cool feature.
Greg Allen, thanks a lot, guys, and I'll follow up on this later with you guys.
Okay,
All right, have a good night.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next item, there's no more new items, so we have a preliminary discussion of 715 through 729 West Main Street, which is in the West Main Street ADC District. We have some folks from Mitchell Matthews Architects here to present the project to us.
So let me introduce this. Apologize for my throat. There's a set of drawings I circulated today, a couple hours ago. I think, do like to get things out to you ahead of meetings, but I know over the years, we've had preliminary discussions where people have brought something to the meeting. So we'll make the most out of this that we can. I think that just a couple caveats to all of this.
Could you put that up, by the way?
Yeah, which
Whenever you're done.
would you like, the picture of it or
Yeah.
the site? Let me go to it.
Whenever you're done, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I didn't bring it with me.
So there's a visual of the site. And I know Kevin and John are here, but so there's a couple of parcels involved here, two in the front on the south that face West Main. Those are within the ADC district. There's an alley that then separates a parcel addressed on Cream Street. That is outside of the ADC district. I don't know what the status of that alley is. Our GIS shows it doesn't come up as a property or a separate parcel. John and Kevin probably address better what that is. So if a project involved this as one lot, then what happens on that back parcel would be part of the review, sort of. But if it were totally separate from the front, then it would not fall under BAR purview. The other piece is, as we all know, the zoning was updated and adopted in December. We, at the staff level, are still trying to understand all the fine tuning that went on at the end. I don't want to put Carl on the spot, but certainly, Carl, if something I raise that no, I mean if it's and I'll get to it in a second about the BAR's role. So, but I have not done an analysis of this relative to the zoning. I haven't talked to zoning about it. So what's in front of you is sort of aspirational and it's not something that I can say, oh yes, everything here is fine, except for the design review. So I just want to get that caveat out of the way. I think the bigger question that would, or two questions that would be at least most helpful, I think, at the beginning of this discussion are the fate of the two contributing structures. The Mel's Diner was, it's a 1960s building. It was added to the, as a contributing structure in 2014 where the map was updated. It involves the entire building. Curiously, this was not originally a diner. It was a dry cleaners, and the back single-story building was the machine works of the dry cleaners. The single-story cinder block building to the east of Mel's is non-contributing. The building on the corner of 8th and West Main kind of difficult to characterize. Some uncertain dates on when it was built, but let's assume it was 1896. It's had a lot done to it. The parapet was changed, the front facade was changed, the storefront was redone. The back addition was added sometime in the 30s, and the entire building was gutted by fire in the 70s. So what's left of it that is of historic character, that's, I don't know, reading through the description, it's more of a shell of a building than anything, so just to be clear on that. But I think that when I spoke with the applicants a couple months ago, or maybe it was, that I know Mel's is important locally. I think it's an iconic piece of architecture that, if nothing else, the front, that the building with the strange roof is really a piece that would be, I think a lot of people would fight to preserve. So that's the question about the preservation and retention of the buildings that you should talk about. I pointed out at the beginning of the meeting, this is zoned CX5, not CX8. That was my error. And the thing that the BAR, as far as the new design goes, I think that it's very similar to 612 West Main. It's a new building on not a lot going on either side of it. That's, there's no tall buildings. It's so how does it, what best fits into this space? What sort of materials? What sort of step back from the road, if you will? And the City Council in its discussions in December, one of the options that went before them, and I think it survived, was the BAR. You all were allowed to reduce heights on a very to be determined precise slice of the downtown mall area, and then everywhere else that's under your purview, if the BAR wanted to reduce the height or proposed a height reduction, it would be not less than, or no more than 2 stories below what zoning allows. Again, I don't know if you'll get into height discussions tonight, but that's where you are on that. And that's all I really had. I just wanted to give you those caveats, and I think said have a discussion about preservation, retention of those structures, and then in something going there, material spacing. What it's a good test of are we designing for what is coming to West Main, or is this designing for retaining some features of West Main that exist on either side of it. So with that, I have no more wisdom to offer. I'll hand off to John and Kevin. You guys can use the podium if you want, and I'll flip through however you ask me to.
I guess for
the
Hi, everybody. I'm Kevin Riddle with Mitchell Matthews Architects. If you could go back to that first aerial plan, Jeff. We're coming to you with a proposal for the 3 sites you see here. They would presumably be combined for what we're presenting to you. So we have 2 that front on West Main Street. There's the 3rd property that's at the corner of Elsom and Cream that would be, again, included with these 2. And so we assume that a proposal here would be reviewed in its entirety by you. The site's a little over a ½ acre in size. And as you can see, the parking lot where maybe some of you park when you go to Continental Divide is not included. That's the one parcel that's not a part of this project. And the next slide, Jeff. Here it is again with the boundaries in red. The site is zoned with our new zoning as CX5. There are properties across from it, across from Cream Street, that are RA. And so that will impose a transition zone on a part of this property. And you'll see the ramifications of that later in the presentation. And the next slide. Here it is again. This time it's just emphasizing where the design control district is and emphasizing the contributing structures, which Jeff just described. The late 19th century building on the corner at 731 West Main, and then the building in which Mel's Cafe operates in the heart of the site. We have some white dashed lines there. Again, you'll see more about this later, where we're asking to what extent might these contributing structures kind of adapt to a newer building? To what extent could they accommodate a new building? Might there be partial demolition to make way for it? And the next slide. So this is just our kind of simple interpretation of where would be the area in plan that would be appropriate for a new building if the existing structures are preserved in part. And so if the building in which Mel's operates, the part of it that fronts on West Main Street were to remain, it does create an opportunity in its way because outdoor amenity space is necessary in the new zoning. And so perhaps we thought that could be a good location for a sort of entry plaza. And so in preserving the building, it also gives us a chance to create what could be a nice space, maybe not that unlike what's happening a few blocks east of here, that plaza around which you have Public Oyster and Oak Heart Social. I think, proof's in the pudding, that space is pretty nice. It's a pretty great social gathering space. Perhaps something like that could happen here. We'll go to the next slide. Here we've just changed to more of a bird's eye view. And the next slide. This is that kind of buildable area that's been translated into 3 dimensions, a volumetric study of where a building might be constructed here. And so you see at the northeast of the site there at the corner of Elsom and Cream, where there would be that transition zone. A transition is a word that we would often call this a step back. And so you can go up to 3 stories and then you have to build 20 feet in at stories above that. And so you see that represented there. Now that transition can also happen at lower stories, which is in fact what we have in our proposal. Also, one more thing, with the CX5 zone, 5 stories is currently the height limit, but we're proposing a residential project which has available to it a bonus of 2 more stories. So that would end up with a 7-story building. And the next slide. Here are just some plan views. This is underground. This is where there might be a parking found for the project accessed from Elsom Street. And the next slide. This is street level. So there would be some parking accessed off of Cream Street toward the rear of the site. Up at the front, we imagine there would be commercial use in this, what you might call the wings of the building, in part of the original grocer that's there at the corner of West Main and 8th Street. And then there would be a new wing built that would serve perhaps a retail use. There is going to be some level of amenities in this building. We haven't really worked out yet exactly what would be where, but this gives you an idea of where it's headed. And the next slide. this just shows you a typical residential level in the upper stories. And the next slide. So here we've returned to the bird's eye view, and we're seeing something that's more like an actual building. This is very much a work in progress, by the way, but this is the beginnings of the shape it might take. And the next slide. We'll take a break here for just a moment to talk about some imagery that has served as inspiration for the project. Some of these are close by, some are not, some are no longer here. Up at the top is the Hotel Albemarle with that pretty wonderful porch at the front, almost something like an arcaded space along the street. The Norcross Station building in the lower left, pretty great building. It would be worse without that fire escape, in my opinion. I like that a lot. Down below, I believe that's where the Violet Crown is now, the Leggett's building. The thing there that we really like is that sign with that white glass reflective background to it. It's almost like it anticipates an Apple iPhone chic, you know. Maybe an interpretation of something like that in a sign on a new building could have some promise. And then to the right, a Mediterranean building with just some great, simple detailing, balconies articulated with variation from level to level, a very simple facade, deep openings with doors and windows. We like that a lot. So on to the next slide. And here is a view of the front, what it could be like. You see the plaza at the bottom surrounding what is today Mel's Cafe. Hopefully would be in the future, even with a project like this coming along. We picture that sign that might have hints of or be inspired by the old Leggett sign happening there on the right wing. Again, very much a work in progress. You know, we haven't quite imagined exactly what it would be like yet, but just that it's on its way. A large window opening up to some sort of bar or a retail space. And we imagine this would be a nice place to gather outside, kind of among all of these different potential businesses. A lobby is beyond. That is where we might capture something of the Hotel Albemarle's covered porch, that there would be a layering there. There would be columns out at the front, and then there would be covered space leading to an enclosed lobby beyond. And the next slide. Here's a similar view, but we've backed away and we're showing more of the surroundings. Imagining what it would be like with more trees planted there. You can kind of see through the trees that what we're proposing at the front with the new wing that's on the east portion of the property, that it would be 2 stories tall, and so its top would relate to many of the other buildings that front on the street there, which are all about 2 stories. And then on that wing, it steps back about 20 feet before it rises to ultimately 7 stories. Now we can go to the next slide. And then here's just another view. Prominent on the left is the 1890s building at the corner of 8th and West Main. And you see again just a different view of the plaza around which this new structure would enclose. Up at the top, you know, we're imagining that there could be some kind of pavilion spaces. We know the roof decks are rather popular now, offering great views. We were wondering too, might it be nice if Mel's remains to really celebrate and extend that unique W-shaped roof. Perhaps there could be some, you know, kind of lovely metal framing that the roof shape would extend out, creating a little more shade, a play of shadows in the plaza. As you go to the right, the new wing of the building might have a sort of soffit that then echoes the undulations of the roof next to it. And so the soffit itself would have a kind of valley shape to it. And then up above, if you know the steel is to be painted in a bold color, maybe it's reintroduced in framing that's within those upper level pavilions. So I will leave it there. We're just here basically to get, first impressions. Do you see promise in what we're developing so far? Do you see things that perhaps we're missing? And just any comments you might have, that would be great.
Anybody care to start?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So just really what we would like from John Matthews, we'd like to really understand or get the feedback initially on the building massing and general proximity to Mel's. So how do you think about that? And then really the bigger picture, any of you objected to the demolition of Mel's. How you felt about that in total and what was the portion of the rear part that is carrying sort of.
So I had a question I had a question regarding that.
Yeah.
I don't know if Jeff can go to the slide with the dashed white lines, where I think y'all were kind of proposing the limits of demo.
Right.
Part of my question, I guess, is the idea and the intent that if we retain Mel's, it would continue to be a restaurant space, or would it just, do we know? And that's a leading question because it's a T shape, and so I guess I'm curious how far back into that T does the kitchen extend, for example, or the restaurant
Right.
function space?
Yeah,
How much room
we
do you need.
Right, we haven't been in there to really measure it and confirm, but it does not extend much at all. In fact, most of the rear portion is basically an auto repair shop right now.
It's where I used to get my old Jaguar fix.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So
Frequently.
Mel's is occupying actually a rather small part of the building, and most of it is underneath that roof, the W roof.
I, for one, would be opposed to the demolition of the front portion of what's now Mel's.
Right.
I'd probably be open to the demolition of the back portion. Don't want to speak for the entire BAR, but that's where I'm landing. Similarly with the 731 West Main, I went and took a look today. It's clear where the 1930s addition is because there's a cold joint in the masonry.
Right.
On the west side, there's still pretty clear evidence of where the storefront was infilled. So, I would encourage y'all to explore that a little bit more. The idea of having opening that up to a view into your amenities, I think acceptable, but perhaps maybe look to do some research, see if there's some ways to maybe echo and honor the original storefront there instead of just blasting a big hole, even though that's kind of what's there now. It seems like it had a recess, perhaps originally.
Right, you're talking about where it fronts on West Main Street?
Yes, but on where it fronts on 8th Street, you can still read the depth of that original storefront.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, I think our idea is for about, from the frontage on West Main Street and 50 feet in, that, at least at the moment, that the building might enjoy some restoration, but that we wouldn't really be proposing that much change to that building there. And even along the masonry facade on 8th Street, much of that might remain, but that some portion within the building. It doesn't rob it of its depth on Main, you know what I mean? We wouldn't want to reduce it to just sort of a stage front.
I agree. I guess what I'm saying is on 8th Street, I think you could actually open that corner up, maybe 10 feet or so back to the next pilaster, if you want.
Oh, right.
A glass or storefront facing 8th, which would kind of open up that corner.
Yeah.
So,
Is the 1930s edition where it drops from 2-story to 1-story?
Yeah.
I think so.
Maybe 2 steps down. It's steps and steps again, but yes.
Yeah.
How much of that 731 are you proposing taking down? Is that sort of dash dashed block in the rear, is that the demo portion? So you kind of, you leave the whole stretch along Main Street, existing or integrated.
Right, right. There might, like James is mentioning, perhaps we visit the possibility of creating some new openings, but leaving that largely intact.
I appreciate y'all working around the existing buildings. That's what we like to see.
Yeah, I like from a site plan approach and a massing approach, I think it's believable and a good strategy that could yield good results. And I think, both the Quirk and the 600 West Main are other good examples of similar strategy that have worked. There's a couple of things that the one challenge I think from the massing standpoint, it's really not so much an issue for us, but this really will make considerable impact on the homes on Elsom Street, but they're outside of our consideration in some ways. They're outside of the historic district, but I can imagine that being an issue for others. From our point of view, the two things that so the massing I feel okay about, but the sort of couple of directions that I see in the articulation of the buildings, and I understand they're early, but I really don't feel good about the extension of the Mel's Diner roof line or the mimicking of it in the building. It seems kind of it diminishes, I think, the original structure, and I would encourage contrast rather than kind of mimicry. And I think we just dealt with that in some detail at the now the Black Cow canopy, where working with a similar aged structure, that we worked hard for that canopy not to be confused with the original automotive station just behind it, and I think that was successful. The other is that I just, as the building design continues, I'd look for ways to convince us that this really belongs in Charlottesville. There's something kind of anywhere-ness or kind of nowhere-ness about the direction of the building articulation that's happening, and that worries me. The horizontal banding that is really strong part runs counter to some of our guidelines about the verticality of large buildings and in commercial districts, and the balconies feel really cheap and inexpensive and kind of could be anywhere. And then I think that the other lesson is the first piece that comes out and really addresses Main Street. I think there's an opportunity there to do something to really address the street with the facade, rather than feeling like kind of like a continuation of the same floor plate kind of wrapped around. And I think the Quirk is an example of taking advantage of that street frontage and really creating a presence that contributes to Main Street. So from my point of view, to summarize, I think okay on the massing, but the building direction, some potential warning flags.
I completely agree with everything that Breck has said. I want to emphasize that I think you need to preserve the entire 19th century portion of that building on the corner of 8th Street. It looks like in your renderings you're only keeping about half of it. I think you need I'm okay with losing the 1930s portion, the one-story portion, but I think you do need to keep that whole two-story portion. And as you're looking at it and looking at that wall There are some interesting vestige signs still on that wall that I hate to see you guys whitewash it or cover it up. The way that you step down the building towards Main Street and have it looks like a little two-story portion in the front, I think is really important, extremely important. I think I was trying to figure out in my head how tall buildings on West Main and on East Main Street are dealt with, and I think they all, except for the bank building right there in the corner, do actually only come up to about 4 stories maximum. So even the was it Miller and Rhodes, or the one that on the corner of 4th Street? It's even a tall building, but it's only 4 stories on that on the mall. So yeah, doing 2 stories, I think, is great. It keeps it with consistent with the rest of the buildings on the street. This is not so much BAR, but I am curious how the streetscape standards are going to affect you on Cream Street, for instance, or if you tear down the 1930s portion of the building in the corner of 8th, will you have to then step your building inward to accommodate the lack of sidewalk currently?
Right.
Cream Street is a major pedestrian route. Most people coming up from my neighborhood don't come up 8th Street to West Main. They actually kind of cut around this parcel and come through the Cream Street alleyway.
Yeah.
Which works because there's a whole lot of extra space, so you don't really need to have a sidewalk there.
Right.
But once you get a big building there and you get a parking garage entrance and you've got more traffic, I think that's going to become more of a problem.
Yeah, I actually should have mentioned, Carl, that this proposal takes the building about 5, almost 6 feet off of that boundary.
Okay.
And the idea is that we would introduce a sidewalk. It wouldn't be extremely wide. It might not be up to some of the aspirational standards of, but on the side on 8th Street, the existing sidewalk is probably not even 5 feet wide.
No.
On West Main Street, it's typical for these buildings on the blocks to the east and west, and as well the 19th century building on this block, for them to be 8 feet from the curb.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we were proposing, and it would take some negotiation with the city, is that there might be 4 new planting beds constructed that would actually come into the street. You have parallel parking there now, so there would have to be some reorganization of the parallel parking, but it would be a way to allow for more trees there that aren't right in the middle of the sidewalks as they're currently planted. And that could be a good way to reach a compromise, because like you say, this would be I think a street type B streetscape is what the new ordinance calls for, and that I think hopes to see a 7-foot planting buffer and an 8-foot sidewalk.
Yeah.
How you find room for that, and especially if there's city infrastructure in the street, that could be a challenge. But I hear you, and especially on Cream Street, we recognize that it would be important to not leave only blacktop between a new building and the existing one on the other side of the street. Yeah.
Well, good. All right, so I'm glad that's on your on your radar. Yeah, I agree with Breck on the aesthetics of the building. The stacked approach is it seems kind of foreign to the context of West Main. I know we don't have many buildings at all that are tall on West Main, but our guidelines do speak to a base, a middle, and a top. And you seem to have
How do y'all view the new Quirk project, referencing that sort of observation? I mean, I know I love the way it comes out, and it has a very nice large opening, and it's wonderful the way the whole lobby continues from that. But when you look at the building itself, it's so very simple. It has vertical openings not unlike this. They're actually staggered in that case, which to me seems like something that that's pretty foreign. And yet the building, I think, altogether works pretty well, largely because it is simple, straightforward, and that's something of what we're going for here. I would differ about the balconies. I mean, maybe it's hard to tell from the imagery, and that critique is true. But those are meant to be metal balconies that would be a little better and special than what we have elsewhere. There's even some kind of shape to the balusters that we think could be a little bit interesting, especially as you got up close. But again, probably hard to appreciate from a view like this. So yeah, I guess I'm talking about the part of the quirk you see in the background, the main body of the building. It seems to me like you could look at that and say, is that Charlottesville? But I don't know. I think it's actually working rather well.
The cork, I mean, I believe the cork does work very well. And I think one of the things that it has worked very hard to have extremely minimal details. I guess if you feel very strongly about the aesthetic that you guys are developing, convince us. But right now, the cartoon version we're seeing right now, the connotation that's coming from that is, I don't think it's what you want it to be. At least what I'm reading it as is probably not what is in your mind.
Well, we'd love for it to be a masonry, and we do it, and it did render the bottom story with a different masonry, so that it would be distinguished from the upper stories. But yeah, it's true. It is so preliminary now. I mean, obviously, this wouldn't be a concrete building, but you might, you could mistake it for one. And I don't think it's going to be a stucco building either. But it's true, once we get into determining material choices, then I think that would help to take it in a promising direction. Maybe the horizontal banding is standing out a little too much, but maybe we can convince you otherwise as we get more into the design.
And there's many ways it could be, it can fit into the context. Some of it can be materiality or texture. It doesn't necessarily have to be, certainly doesn't have to be red brick, but I think proportion, the way that it relates to the building rhythm along West Main, all of those things can contribute. And I do agree that that quirk is really successful. One of the ways that it has been successful, and we've seen other buildings not be as successful, is that they were able to hold on to the materiality that they proposed from the beginning. We've seen other projects that have been similarly simple, but the materials got cheaper and cheaper, and that makes a massive difference. And so it's something to consider.
Yeah, I guess I'm just not sure how kind of enhanced or detailing that echoes the traditional will necessarily make up for materials that just get too expensive to use. You know what I mean? But right, it is our challenge to make a case for what we bring to you. Yeah.
I'll add one other comment on that issue, which is when you look at that picture of the quirk, the sort of front facade is kind of more in keeping with the massing and the scale of the rest of the street. Whereas if you contrast it with this image, the front sort of facade, and by that I'm talking about just the wing on the right-hand side, carries all of that other sort of the rest of the building. So there's a continuity that happens there that draws your eye to the whole thing, versus in the quirk you don't see that as much. And that might be something that you were kind of referring to, I felt like, in talking about seeing some contrast, which I also agree with, between the kind of historic structures and what you're presenting as your front facade. So I think that's an important difference between sort of these two images that we were just looking at.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm going to echo everybody else, and I really appreciate the willingness to maintain historic structures. I mean, I think those are two pieces of fabric that we all kind of love about Main Street, and we all associate as part of our place. So keeping those goes a long way. I also like the way that you're starting to look at activating the roof and the sort of the upper portion of the building, and seeing that as a place of activity, that might interrupt some of the sort of more of the monotony from story one up to the top. So kind of like the feeling of whimsy up there, and I don't know if there's a way to carry that a little bit more too. Just I don't think it's a matter so much of this has to look like Charlottesville. It's just, it's more of kind of the issues that other folks have raised, which is thinking of detailing, texturing, that makes it its own, I guess, which then adds it to our fabric and the sort of unique fabric that's already there that you're trying to maintain.
In general, I like the massing. I like the way it looks. I'm not sure what looking like Charlottesville necessarily means in that regard. I want a building that's clean, modern, and preserves the historic structures as part of that. And I think that this direction is probably the right direction to go, in my opinion, at this point. Of course, we'll have to go through the process and see what the materials are. The point taken earlier made is we've gone through a lot of buildings that came out with wonderful materials, and then, well, we can't get that, or we can't get, and they got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and they don't look nearly as good as they were initially proposed. So be very careful about that as you go forward with this. But I like the massing. I like the way you're stepping it back.
I want to speak to the Mel's building, that I think it's one of the most interesting buildings in Charlotte. So I don't think we have a lot of examples of this mid-century, almost Googie type architecture in the city. And so I think, having that outdoor space around it to preserve, I think a lot of what's important is like seeing that roof line and having some breathing room around it. So I think the amount of outdoor space you have around it now is a good amount, and I wouldn't want to see that minimized.
Right.
To try to really kind of let that roof line sing. I am open to demolishing the garage portions at the back of the site. I don't read those in the same way as I do the front of that building. I do think I would like to see the 731 building preserved to the whole second story of the building. I don't think it blows up your floor plate to work around that. And I do think some of the ghost signage along 8th Street is interesting, and if there's any way to kind of incorporate that or keep that as that building gets preserved. And just talking about Mel's specifically, I mean, I think it's been around since the 90s, the business itself, and just being respectful of trying to have this project kind of work around and not run that business off, I think is an important thing for the community. And yeah, again, so that outdoor space I think is important, and leaving some of it to be dedicated to the restaurant and not having it all just feel like the front entry into the building, I think is a way to kind of do that. The massing and the rendering itself, I don't have a lot of issues with. I think it's kind of interesting. So I don't have a lot of comments there. I think some of the precedent imagery, the Leggett's sign, I think incorporating some of that into the sign. The Mel's building does an interesting, that you can see the original dry cleaning sign. They've kind of
adapted it, yeah.
Kept a portion of it, but made it their own.
Yeah,
so
that's funny.
Respecting that, but then being able to incorporate interesting signage into the new building, I think is a good thing to bring into it. Yeah, I think those are the comments that I have at this point.
One thing, just to maybe get some other observations, if you have some. Breck was mentioning the potential for kind of extending that roof form out with a canopy like we're showing here. And I appreciate what you're saying. I wouldn't want to add something there that would kind of muddy the history or appear to be like we were recreating something that wasn't there. I guess the idea was that we were thinking this would sort of stand out as different, but just sort of amplifying what, because right now, actually, when you look at that roof form, and maybe this is a virtue in some people's mind, it feels a little shallow. Like it almost, it feels like you want it to come out and present a little bit more. And so to create a little more kind of covering and shelter of that space, and with these columns extending down, with these red beams perhaps supporting those, I don't think it would be mistaken for something that was there at Mel's all along. We also decided, perhaps somewhat arbitrarily, but to break it. So you have, like on the left, you have a V shape that kind of mimics what's there. And then it's kind of missing all the way back to the building. And then it's taken back up again there to the right. Now, now maybe now that I pointed that out, you like it even less. But that was just sort of a way to give it a little bit of kind of individuality, a little asymmetry, kind of within the playing off of the kind of symmetry that it currently has. If other people think it's a bad idea, I mean, I hear you. I don't want to necessarily give up its potential, though, right away.
It's a little hard to read the image for me.
Can you go to the next slide?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could go to like
The one that's in
next
gold?
slide or.
And maybe,
slide-
and maybe that's
slide
what it's a question
15.
of, just in the future, to kind of show it more clearly or distinctly to you. Probably the next one gives you a slightly better idea of it, although even there, maybe it's obscured somewhat.
The aerial view probably helps.
Yeah, I think you can see those
I think it's
kind of individual
sheet 11.
rafters, so to speak, in the view from above.
If you go to
That
sheet
should be-
11.
Well, before you leave that one, this image gives me a little pause just in, and I know you'll do a better job, but it looks like the unfinished hotel on the downtown mall. And that's, we should avoid that at all costs, so.
Oh, what the whole building does.
I mean, just with this bacteria holes and, you know, it looks like a bombed out hotel. So, you know, I also wonder if a cornice at the top wouldn't hurt. You know, I'm not a modern architect, so I will leave you guys to those details. But, you know, I think that a rooftop amenity is a great idea. As you pointed out, lots of people love them. I think that, yeah, in the way you're using color scheme to try and tie down to Mel's or something, that's helpful. That was just a comment that when I first looked through the slides this afternoon, that kind of, I was like, oh God, I think it's the landmark or something, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it comes off as a little stark. Part of what we were thinking too is that whatever sort of material or color is ultimately used on much of the building, it might be better that it be somewhat muted and reserved. Yeah, this is very basic, and you know, it is very just early going. But we also were making some effort, at least at this stage, to show the potential for those to be somewhat deeper openings, the vertical openings, to allow for, in some cases, maybe just the shallowest of Juliet balconies. But that sort of relief could actually be to its benefit, even though maybe in this illustration it creates the illusion of a derelict structure.
I mean, I recognize it's very preliminary, so.
Yeah.
I don't want to go down that road too far. My other thought was, I agree with Tyler in that, in preserving a lot of open space around Mel's. I'll just mention that in a lot of recent applications where we have open space, that's dining space, pretty soon people are asking for tents. And so I hate to see tents starting to get crammed in here. Just extra canopies, you know, and so I think as your design develops, just be conscious of that and consider it.
Right.
That's probably a reason to put those there then.
I don't think I had realized the degree of the proposal to build this canopy structure in front of the building. I don't want to speak for everyone, but in my opinion, I think you're distracting from the Mel's building with that structure. So I don't think I'd want to see that built in the front.
Okay.
And just to preserve as much as of that street view as it is today.
Yeah, I agree with Breck and Tyler. I mean, I think Celebrating Mel's it's the jewel, right?
Yeah.
And I think people will say, wow, look at what a great job they did. They saved that cool, neat piece of architecture and made their own cool, neat piece of architecture.
Right, right.
And as Tyler said, save the business as well.
Yep.
I feel like the massing, yeah, someone, I think, Carl, you had said you liked the two-story. I feel like the building could come forward more towards Main Street than just the two stories. There's many taller buildings along the north side of Main Street.
So
And
I was saying, the precedent seems to be a maximum of 4 stories.
yeah, 4 stories might feel better than 7, but I feel like more could come forward. It ends up making it look like 3 tiny buildings in front, and it could be maybe more successful to have a little bit more of a wall, feel more of a wall.
I kind of would like to see those upper stories. Right now, it looks like it's just a really tall 1-story building on the front, and it almost seems to want to have some windows up there on the 2nd story.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, yeah, that'll take a little bit of evaluation as we get deeper into this, because I have been trying to puzzle out, like, how can we create this sort of cool inverted ceiling that would continue in, echoing the sort of the shallow canopy of that portion outside. But maybe rhyming with the W of Mel's is being discouraged anyway. So maybe some reevaluation on the shape that takes could be beneficial. I don't know.
The modern interpretation of the 731 building, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go out on a limb. I know that we typically don't want, for new construction, to mimic historic aspects of the building. We want it, I just read from, I'm going to contradict the guideline I just read from in the last application, but that's what we can do here. And that we want them to be compatible, but maybe contrasting, showing old with new. Certainly, if we retain 731, hopefully we'll retain some aspects of that building and the era of that building. But I'm thinking with regard to the new structure, I mean, 1962 is a pretty cool year for architecture, folks. And I mean, I just scrolled through there's some awesome hotels that were built in a very contemporary style in the 1960s. I'd rather see something that really looks stylized. Not, you're not going to mimic the W of Mel's, but maybe grasping that era and complementing it in something that would really be actually significant and really beautiful. Instead of something I feel like this building is trying to downplay itself. Mm-hmm. It's acting small, and I just think you could do something really significant and really something remarkable there, with a nod to mid-century.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would harm either of the existing buildings if it's done well. I think it would certainly with the Mel's building, complement it. But not try to mimic it, not try to have the W roof line or anything like that. But there's just some great architecture that happened, a long time ago.
Right.
And
I like that idea.
And as Tyler said, there's really nothing like Mel's in Charlottesville. It's that really unique thing. And a lot of it has been destroyed. We did have some pretty groovy mid-century buildings that have been, for one reason or another, disregarded as being historic in the last 30 to 40 years and are no longer. Anyway, that's just an idea.
I get probably a question or two a month about that, and some buildings that are gone. Richard Guy Wilson's really trying to burrow into some of the architecture of the 40s and 50s and 60s of Charlottesville. And he's asked me about some buildings I'd never been aware of, and some that we have that, like for example, go past Food of All Nations. There's that exposed aggregate kind of bunker building. That's a pretty interesting story. It wasn't somebody saying, I don't know what to use. How about cement? So there are some designs around the city that are still left, but they're hidden. And I would agree with you. I think too often, when a lot of folks will call me, and I even have said it to these two gentlemen several times, the BAR is not afraid of new architecture. Don't come in here and tell us what you're trying to replicate, from the lawn, or be bold and be new, and then that's a place to start from. So I agree entirely with what Sherry's saying. I wanted to just, if I could throw in just some thoughts that, and maybe these are more for design review guideline or design guidelines discussion, but one of the things, and Brett can chime in on this as well, that, and I see if I can make sure I get this, but in our discussions about the downtown mall, we're recognizing these side streets that they're not active. Some are paved, some have brick, but they're just long blank walls. And I think that it's an opportunity here, certainly, and in the design guidelines. So I'm using you guys, if you don't mind, as a little bulletin board right now. But I think it's worth exploring, because to me, right, I've walked down that's not an inviting street, but we've got these coming off of the mall, so there's an opportunity here to do some things, and also just a lot of, so what used to be here was just an extension of this building here. Well, no separate buildings, but this was a big furniture store burned down in the 60s, and I hadn't realized that this building had been gutted in the 70s. So I would be curious what has the fires, what's been the impact on that structure, because I'm just becoming less and less impressed with this building. But the other thing that I had that I wanted to show, and I was looking it up, is there's this not old photo, but
Well, you have this image up, Jeff, by the way. I do agree with everyone's comments about this facade on 8th Street, the kind of the grunginess, the toughness, the character of it. I think that would be important to keep that, the traces of signs and text. Yeah.
There's a lot going on. So this image here, and just while we have a collective group, I cannot for the life of me figure out. There's so much going on with this photo, but I didn't want to pass up an opportunity to ask,
This shows
The Cloud Woman.
This is what I was talking about on the 8th Street side, where the front bay was probably open originally, so you could open up that corner.
Right. Yeah, that would be pretty cool. Yeah, I think they've done some weird things over the years. It's like you have a sort of pilaster applied and fluted there, but now they've come back and sort of bricked over some of that. It's interesting, too, the image on the left, you can see that for a very long time, the brickwork up above the second-story windows has sort of had variation that reflects some kind of repairs or just slight changes in materials. It seems like they've been patching things together on the building for generations.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going on in there. Guess they didn't have any heat.
there for, you know, stoves or.
There's 4 window unit air conditioners. Why not 4 chimneys?
I mean, my tiny little house had 4 wood stoves in it at one point. And that was built in 1940.
So, there, sorry for interrupting, but I just wanted to throw those.
And I would think too, I don't know if you guys disagree, when we look at this facade that faces what would be sort of the court of Mel's of the 19th century building, you know, it's just painted kind of a yellow right now, no openings. I would think there would be an opportunity to maybe create some openings at ground level there that could be successful. I don't know if people agree with that or not. Especially if there's never going to be anything cheek to jowl with it again.
Yeah, I would just encourage openings that are clearly modern and probably larger than the typical historic openings on that building.
Okay.
It's a similar condition as the, that the ice rink,
The code building?
the code building, where they kept the facade, but then that whole new facade is new on the west side. Yeah.
Do you have any other feedback on any topics you're looking for from us?
I don't think so. John, did you have anything else?
No,
you
I
wanted
think
to
we're
ask?
good. I think that's all been very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Thank y'all for presenting to us. Appreciate it.
I think it's a no.
John, Kevin, thank you.
Well, so those pilasters are painted on right now.
I think in the spirit of making sure
They're there, but they're just painted.
our staff member heals up well, our agenda's complete for this evening.
The irony is that, I think I said it earlier, I didn't have my computer at home, and I didn't have the ability, even if I had it at home, because it changed how we access, and, you know, remotely, so I was like, I gotta go in no matter what. And Missy's like, well, you could cancel the meeting, and I'm like, I can't,
No.
John will beat me up, but I was like, it's like, it's much easier to just come in here and get this over with, but, I appreciate what you're saying. I have a very, very busy, month coming up, in terms of 4 weeks, so we have some significant entrance corridor projects coming in, so I'm gonna be, busy. So I don't know quite what to do with the guidelines at this point. Tyler shared something today. I think just gonna have to set it aside and let me get over these hurdles, and I'll see what we can do. Share some ideas with the chair and the vice chair about picking it up in February. Also, I think February is another 1C meeting, so just have that in mind. But just so you all know, what's going on internally is with the new zoning ordinance. Now we've got to get how we do what we do completely shifted over to using new ordinance language, and the process that's laid out in there. Some procedures have changed, some terminology has changed. We have a new computer system. If any of you have noticed, if you submit something to the city now, it all comes in electronically. And Molly was she took care of that for me, because it was only till last Thursday that I figured out how to log on to that. So I beg patience, but we will get to the guidelines, but it's probably going to be a little bit of a break. I don't have any updates for you all, except for the downtown mall National Register nomination. Went to the feds. They had a question about clarifying a date of a period of importance. The DHR is resolving, so I think that'll still go through, but that's why we haven't heard about that. And then, as I said, shared, on Monday, Steve Gaines will be making presentations to City Council about the tree management plan on the mall, so if you've got any questions about that, I urge you to listen in on that, so. But are any burning issues that you all had need me to, and I know I need to still figure out a day, and
Sure.
I don't foresee anything, I don't have anything on coming in, no one's really talked to me about any big BAR issues, so, but I suspect this is,
They got some work to do. They won't be back next month. All right, well, thank you, everybody.
Mayor, move that we adjourn.
Your second.
Second.
All right, I think we're all in favor.
Somebody can figure out the mystery of 731. Carl's on it.
So,
It was a mural or something.
yeah, the picture that Jeff put up with the pilasters and all that, they're all painted on, but if you look today, they're still there. But the rest of the mural, I guess the other colors of paint faded off, and the vestige signs came back.
Along the 8th Street side.
Yeah, so the one that had.